Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, a Facilities Roundtable Discussion, Year-End Reflections, Managing Tech, Emergency Response, Succession Planning, and Facility Operations. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by ARC Facilities. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. So just to start, ARC Facilities is transforming access to facilities information with a mobile-first platform for on-the-go facilities teams. Additional housekeeping items include that there will be a Q&A question and answer segment at the end of the discussion today. So please find the question box in the dashboard on your screen. This is where you can submit questions for our speakers today. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Now I'll introduce your speakers for this discussion, which will be moderated by David Trask, National Director, ARC Facilities, and host of the Facility Voices podcast. So to start, Shalita Myrick, Principal Facilities Project Manager with A.D. Anderson Cancer Center, Jonathan Huntley, System Director of Infrastructure for Bon Secours Mercy Health, Raymond Owens, Facilities Director of Mexican American Opportunity Fund, and Chance Sullivan, Assistant Director of Facilities and Services for the University of Rochester. So everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. And David, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you for the audience and our panelists for joining me today. And we're really going to do a wrap up of some of the learnings that we've uncovered over the last year. And I'm happy to invite all of our panelists to share what they've heard, what they've seen with you. And what we're going to really get started with is how are teams coping with that staff shortage issue and how they're using technologies and to really enhance that response, training and also recruitment and planning, and also just freeing up that time that nobody seems to really have today. And with that, everybody started to uncover that they've got a lot of folks that are retiring. Some of them have already seen the first wave or two, but what's compounding the challenge with that loss of those people is the current labor shortage. It's happening nationwide, well, really globally. And what are some of the ways that you're working to fill those gaps in recruiting, retention, career ladders, and also utilizing technologies? And I'd really like to start with Shalita on this. Shalita, what are you running into with this issue?
Yeah, so look, I love that folks are retiring to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And I'm glad that you said technology, because I think that a lot of times we say that and people think that we're losing the focus on the people and human labor element. And we're not, because the truth that we all know is that we do need to add more people to the labor force. That is critical. And what I do mean when I say using technology in support of your people is that in this changing landscape for both our present and our future state, we need to make the current workforce more efficiently productive, right? And we can do that by leveraging systems and data available to us to, one, get accurate views of the health and risks in our operations, which will, two, allow us to see where we're doing well so we aren't investing our limited labor resources where they aren't necessarily needed. And this then allows us to not only catch up with the needs of our facilities, but to then, three, drive towards predictive maintenance and using those data-driven workflows to prioritize and resolve events more effectively and efficiently.
I love that perspective because, again, I think one of the things that resonated in what you said is it's essentially a tool. You're putting new tools in their hands to make their work-life balance even easier or better to manage. I love that. Let's go over to Chance. Chance, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, these retirements are coming, and there's a lot of institutional knowledge going out the door. When that's happening, it's hard, almost impossible nowadays to get people in the door. So you definitely have to focus on that recruiting and the retention, the career ladders. there's a lot behind it, a lot to unpack with that altogether. But like with recruiting, every time I go to a career fair, upcoming people are asking, well, do you have some sort of training program or an apprenticeship to help support me through the process? Well, that's something that's definitely necessary nowadays. Every organization needs to keep this in mind because people want to feel supported. And then not only that, but the people that you do have for retention, they want to be upskilled. They want to know that they're also getting that support with staying up with technology and the improvements and the day-to-day operation. So it's completely necessary. And then to go along with it, I know you mentioned the career ladder, the creating an ascension program, showing them a path within their career and what time frames, how can they get there? You know, electrician jumping to whatever other position, it doesn't matter. As long as you create that path for them and make a clear set goal, that's what people are looking for. They just want to be supported.
Well, and you both have touched on that. It's in support of the team, and I think those are critical insights for anybody who's looking to start within an org. And Ramon, what are you seeing at your sites?
So I'm having retirements and everything of the sorts, but I think that the goal, well, the approach that I've taken is taking my old guys, my veterans, and retaining what I can, right? Really getting with them, and I can't get the trade from them, but I can get the routines. Like after these facilities, what are you routinely doing? And kind of create a training off of that. Because with the new guys that come in, we could utilize this as a tool to say, for this specific building, we need you to do A, B, C, D, E. So my overall goal is just retaining what I can from these guys. Recruiting, we do community events. We do things like Indeed to try to get guys in, but it really is a shortage of people out there. We don't really see the influx of staff coming in. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing is really seeing how I could better train the staff that I have, as well as leveraging vendors to kind of fill in the gaps of what we don't have. Because with my guys that know how to do the plumbing and electricity, I really don't get the new guys coming in being a jack of all trades. So I try to train them on at least the routine stuff. Your air filters, you're changing out my fixtures, light bulbs, ground maintenance, and things of such, and leave the bigger jobs to vendors. And that seems to be what's working for us right now.
No, that's great. And I think cross training, all the things that all three of you said are things that resonates with the audience with their current situation. And of course it varies, a little bit from site to site, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you're losing people, capturing as much of that knowledge as you can, but also cross-training and doing some of the other programs like you're talking about, even apprentice programs like Chance mentioned, or that cross-training like Ramon, or even leveraging the technology like Shalita was talking about. I think those are all part of the bigger solution, and I appreciate you sharing those insights. But this leads right into that segue of succession planning and capturing that institutional knowledge, and really, how are you able to strategize to do that? And I think the challenge that most folks run into is this, and it's you guys all touched on this, and that's losing those key people. And what does that impact on your site? And so what are some of those ways that it's impacted your teams, and what are some of those things that you've really implemented or you're looking to implement to retain and recruit? So let's go ahead and start with Ramon on this one.
So we've just recently did a big succession planning at MAOF, and what we're finding is pretty much the strategy I'm taking is the next man up, right? My next guy who's able to take on those workloads, that has the bandwidth to handle a little bit more responsibility in the organization, and just try to just train down. losing these guys, losing my veterans is hard, right? I have 57 facilities, 120 maintenance guys, but my best guys is like 20 out of 120. And these guys have been with us for 30, 20, 18 years. So just trying to, like I said, create plans about training programs around them, because there really isn't a lot of resources out there as far as training. I mean, we have our virtuals and things like that, but we're not finding any success with the systems that virtual trainings are there. So our guys aren't there. So we're just basically doing the next man up. Who I see that's available, that can come into management, that can train, and has the ability to lead. And as far as the new recruits, we just, train them from the training that we got from our older guys.
Yeah, I can definitely see a pattern that of people that I've spoke with as well. And, you hit on something. You've got that large team, but roughly 20 of those people are the people that are either leaving or that have the most institutional knowledge. And, a lot of the folks that I speak with, and I talk to around the country that say similar stories. I've got 5 guys, 10 guys, whatever on my team that are the ones that are kind of the keeper of the institutional knowledge. The challenge is that represents 80% of the knowledge of your building, of your team. And that's a ripple effect. And so, Shalita, what are some of the ways that you guys are really looking to capture that information and capture that knowledge through either training practices or other methods?
Yeah, I think what Ramon said is important about succession planning for sure. And also we have to look at succession planning to say, just because they're the next in line, are they truly the best for the role? And I think, we can agree, we lose a key team member and our first thought is like, dang, what do I need to pick up in their place? And it sounds like a me first attitude. But I can tell you from the teams that I've been a part of, it's rooted in wanting the organization to be successful. So we do have to give them the tools to be successful, not just in their current role, but in any stretch assignments they may take on in the interim. So the different ways and the organizations I've worked with have done a wonderful job understanding, the economic impact to their workforce and adjusting compensation to mirror those changes. But compensation isn't the only resource folks need to feel supported with this additional responsibility. They need to feel comfortable in the task they're covering. So again, like Ramon said, this can be accomplished with consistent cross-functional training before we're ever left with a gap from someone leaving, right? But it also helps staff to see transparent leadership in recruiting efforts and know that it's well understood that, yes, we may be asking you to flex temporarily, but not until you break. This is a temporary environment. And while recruiting, we really should be re-examining the roles and responsibilities that we need filled. Just because a job description that we used to fill the role 10 years ago required a PE does it today. Are we over describing ourselves into what we think is an ideal candidate and actually losing out on moldable and adaptable talent? Are there opportunities to recruit across industries and across markets to fill our operational gaps, right? So all of that, to sum it all up, sorry, we're looking at market compensation and cross-functional training to retain, and then adjusting our roles and responsibilities and able to recruit.
I love that. And I think a lot of orgs are even doing internal investments like you're talking about, investing in you and Ramon both touched on that, but also reaching out to people that are even more generalists and then training them from within. And I think that I loved your insights on that. That's wonderful. And Chance, why don't you jump in here and talk about how you're handling it?
Yeah, I got to say, those are fantastic points made by both Shalita and Ramon there. So what we're doing right now is, in the short term, we're sticking people with those folks that are retiring. Even if it's a temporary measure, just to try to absorb what we can. Ultimately, you're not going to grasp everything and get everything you need from someone that's been there for 40 years. But It's a temporary measure. It does end up working out, especially if that person is the person that's taking that individual's place, just to get them the lay of the land, know how to work with all the individuals that they'll be working with, whatever it may be. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is, I'm going to circle back right to how I answered question number one. We realized that to be truly impactful and to look at this holistically, we needed to possibly create an apprenticeship program. So it's something that we are looking at right now. We're trying to run every single avenue and make sure that it is possible. Where, this is something that you're going to walk and not run with, right? You want to build it to sustain for the future. So we're looking at that. And then going back to when I talked about upskilling, what we did was we created a training catalog for our personnel that are here. And what is in it is local trainings, regional trainings, and national based trainings. So what we did was provided resources of all these different things that are available to you across the country. And we know that we have the funding source. So as long as people are willing to learn and they're being shown what are the possibilities, then that's kind of what we've been relying upon. So we're really trying to look at it in the grand view, because we're not getting the numbers back that we did before. I mean, the number of vacancies, what we have retirements coming out the doors. I mean, depending on the site, we have 25%, 35%. In 10 years, 60% of our force is going to be out the door. So we really had to look at this comprehensively, and that apprenticeship program really makes a lot of sense. So that's where we're focusing our efforts.
Well, I loved a few of the things that you said there. One in particular was creating those lists, or that, for lack of a better term, book of the building. It's or Bible of the building. It's here's all the information available, and capturing that. The underlying theme is capturing as much of that information before the team walks out the door, and I think that's definitely key. So let's go on to our next subject here, and that is with regards to time crunch. Supply chain issues have impacted everybody. Getting parts, getting replacement equipment, but also I've heard many orgs are doing a lot of FCA, so facility condition assessments. But when they're looking at what they've got, I'm hearing over and over again that a lot of those come back incomplete. So they're missing information or missing key things, even simple things like location. Where is it? But that equipment inventory and identifying where those assets are can be a challenge. And for the panelists here, how does that really impact you? So what are some of the ways that you recommend orgs, if they're thinking about FCAs or thinking about capturing a lot of that legacy knowledge, well, like we were talking about, because what a lot of that ends up being is in that person's head. They just know where everything is. And there's also a lot of information that just, for lack of a better term, and you see it here, fugitive information that's out there, or it's in different locations or in multiple people's heads. What are some ways that you're documenting that information, or able to document that and improve those processes? But also, how is that impacting your preventative and deferred maintenance, and how are the supply chain issues kind of compounding that? So with this one, let's start with Jonathan. Jonathan, you come from a big network too. So how is this impacting you guys across your network?
So for us, it is absolutely a challenge. I've been here 4 years, and one of the things I've had to learn is, I shared this, I think, on our podcast, David. Our mantra is progress over perfection for our group. Understanding that you're not going to be perfect, and you're not going to get it all on day one or even day 100. But if you're making things better by incremental steps, that's still positive. You're leaving it better each day, right? So one of the big things, one of the big problems that I see continuously with facility condition assessments is that they're done and they're never updated. It's not any good 2 years later, because so much changes 2 years later, right?
Snapshot in time.
Yeah, and in that snapshot in time, there's very likely something that was missed. You didn't see every nook and cranny. You saw 90% of it. So what I challenge, our sites are, because we do this really in conjunction with master facility planning, with the strategy team and things like that, to understand, okay, this is what I got. This is the assets that I have, but want to try to marry that with strategy, because anything that we're going to do needs to match that strategy. The type of air handler that I need for an OR is different than the type of air handler I need for a patient room. And, the space usage is key. Understanding what we're going to do in the future, not just today, but the future. So we try to marry that, but those things change as leadership changes. I mean, anybody that knows healthcare, leadership tends to be a revolving door. These guys, and ladies, they're there for 3 to 5 years and they move on somewhere else. That's the trend. That's their growth. That's how they move up in the world. So with that comes new ideas of how things should be done, new ideas for space usage. And so with that, there comes changes to an FCA. And I think we miss that. I think that gets dropped quite often. So that's the big one I challenge everybody out there is it's not just about doing the initial one, it's about keeping it updated. As far as supply chain goes, one of the ways that we're really addressing this, in the course of design, the design of new projects and renovation of spaces, is we're one, taking a hard look at what it's going to be like to maintain this equipment, and then two, we're setting aside early packages for release on like long lead equipment so that it doesn't impact overall schedules. Typically, in the old world, you would wait until your project was completely designed before you released any equipment. Now we're doing it halfway through, and that's so that our projects don't become 3-year projects to accomplish 18 months worth of work. Is really where that's born out of. So because we're all being challenged, speed of market, how do I get things up and running faster? So
yeah, no, I can see that. And to your first point with regards to the snapshot in time, like we were talking about, it's if it's not being updated, what good is it? Mm-hmm. Things are constantly changing, and everybody who's in facilities, things change daily, weekly, monthly, you swap out things. And the challenge is, through that entire process of things changing, people are leaving. Yes. So a lot of that institutional knowledge, like you're talking about, kind of goes out the door.
And new opinions of how things should be done or handled come in the door.
Certainly. So Ramon, why don't you jump in and share what you've seen?
This is good. So one of the biggest barriers I see FCAs, risk assessments, or master facility planning, one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of us are having are the costs, right? They're super expensive to get, especially when you have multiple facilities, larger facilities, older buildings. The cost to get these plans done is astronomical, depending on, because it's charged by the square footage. And if you have even a small building like 10,000 square feet, and it can get a little bit spendy. So one of the ways that I can advise to get around is get your pipes inspected by your local plumber. Get your electricity inspected by your electrician. Get your HVA system assessed by a HVAC company, and kind of get an idea of the condition of your ACs, your pipes, your electricity, your fire safety, your security systems. If your organization doesn't have the resources to get these plans done, because they're critical, especially when things are going to fail. They fail all the time. You may have older AC units, which is the case for a lot of companies. You may have old steel pipes that need to be descaled or just right out replaced because you're having floods and things of that nature. So I think that's one of the ways that we're getting it done. I am able to get a few risk assessments, but that's on a case by case. Master facility planning is just out because, for organization my size and a number of buildings, you're talking about maybe 1.2 million, and that's just for the study and getting everything done. A lot of organizations don't have those resources. So I would tell the FM, call your plumber. Your plumber can tell you the condition of your pipes. He can tell you where your shutoff's at. He can locate everything. This is at a less expense than actually getting the research and the planning done. What I'm doing with preventative on the buildings that I can get preventative, we can get preventative done. Get the pipes jetted twice a year, change out AC filters when they need to be changed, get my HVA systems washed, pump freon, and things of that nature. But the deferred maintenance is a killer. I look at deferred maintenance is riding around in traffic with bad brakes. It's only a matter of time before you crash. And deferred maintenance is not always our fault. With our buildings, sometimes we own the building, but in a lot of times we're under a lease structure. And in those structures, we have obstacles. One of the structures is that if we rent from a larger, like a state, county organization, if something fails, we have to get permission first to do the repair. It takes them forever. That means whoever's responsible for that lease has to stop what they're doing and then give us the okay to replace a pipe or fix the AC system or fix the electrical. Or if they have a board of directors, that's the same thing. Another big issue that I'm facing right now, although I have maintenance staff, in some of my leases, we have to give the landlord staff the opportunity to fix it. Case in point, one of my buildings had a flood, and it took them, they fixed the flood in like a week or something like that, but it took them 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks to put everything back together. So deferred maintenance is a tricky type of thing that sometimes it's inherited. And in other cases, and these are small cases, due to COVID, some of our landlords don't have the resources to make it. So when things reach their life expectancy, like my plumbing, I have 2 buildings that need a repipe and the landlord doesn't have the money. I have another couple buildings where the AC systems are out. They're over 30 years old. They need to go. We need vents. We need new ducts. We need everything. And landlord doesn't have the money. So my approach to it is a partnership. Why don't so kind of example, our organization will pay it and we'll work out a deal, rent or whatever reimbursement to take care of the deferred maintenance. So that's kind of where the biggest issue where I'm seeing in deferred. The buildings that we own really don't have that deferred issue, sure. But you just have to do the best you can when it comes down to your deferred maintenance.
No, I appreciate you sharing those insights, and I loved your example of deferred. It's like driving a car with no brakes, and I think a lot of orgs they struggle with deferred, and I've heard some folks that have even said things like, what deferred means it's not going to happen. It's just kicking that can down the road. But I think a lot of orgs are planning for deferred down the road, but again, it comes down to, in many cases, it's money. It's just the reason it's shifted into deferred is it's money. And
I'll add to that too.
Please.
I think sometimes deferred maintenance has a negative connotation to it, and it does for a lot of reasons, right? Because it's naturally going to lead you that way. But one of the things that we do and that I try to stress to others is deferred maintenance is really a calculation of risk. It's not necessarily, when we say an air handler has reached its end of life and it's now in deferred maintenance, that doesn't mean that it stopped working. It still works. It just means that its risk has gone up for failure.
Right.
And I think for some people who maybe don't fully understand that, or definitely leadership, when we go to talk to leadership, when they hear the word deferred maintenance, they immediately think that means I have that much that has to be replaced today. And no, it doesn't. I don't have 100 million in deferred maintenance that has to be replaced today. It means it's a calculation of risk that we need to address over a period of time.
Sure.
And if I can add one little last piece, and this is the hard side of our jobs, right? If it's not going to stop operations, 9 times out of 10, the higher ups are going to ignore it, right? If we don't put this scare factor in there, it's going to be ignored. And that's kind of the sad part, because we also have to consider the health of our organizations. Do we currently have the money to make the repairs? And sometimes if it's not going to stop the doors from opening or stop us from making money, we're just going to kick the can. We'll deal with it when we can deal with it. So that's kind of
that's fair. I think that's fair. Chance, why don't you jump in here and share what you're finding?
Yeah, those are all great points. That that number, that deferred maintenance number, that shock value. Sometimes that's just a great piece to bring up the line, though, and give people a little shock and say, hey, this is current state. They may not completely understand what that means, but you know that you're in a decent spot. But ultimately, you want to be able to plan for the future. You want a larger budget. You want all these things that are going to help you reach those end goals. So, going back to the FCAs, right? They are a fantastic tool if you have good data. I mean, it's completely reliant upon that. When I started at the university, almost 2 years ago now, there was some FCAs. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. Great. What was this based off of? Let's see some of the data. I started going through the data and actually seeing what was real and what wasn't. 80% of it was wrong. Right. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you have the money to do the FCA. It matters that data is good. So something that we started doing, we actually brought in a consultant to come in and do asset data collection, just because we didn't have the capability of doing it in-house because we're over a large property. But so we're collecting everything from, IDs, models, serial, O&Ms, consumables, expected life expectancy. There's so many things that we're trying to put together to actually be able to make informed decisions down the line to give that good FCA. We plan on doing a nice cross-sectional view for an FCA here shortly, with all the different age of the buildings that we have across our enterprise. It's necessary. If you really want to get a good deferred maintenance number, you got to have that good information. That's just the base. So leaning into the impact of supply chain. I mean, gosh, that's getting us all the time. Electrical gear seems to be the one that just sneaks up on us. We've been planning change out some of our MDP gear for the past couple of years. Something that would normally take 8 months is 24 months. It's hard to truly plan that far out, but you have to. That's the new world we're living in, and making sure that you have the resources at that point in time. So all I say to that is hopefully that it catches up and we can start doing our job more efficiently as supply chain gets a little bit better. But the impacts of COVID have been absolutely enormous.
Well, I would say the impacts of changing regs.
There you go.
Are affecting that as well.
Yeah.
With the update to refrigerant usage coming into effect, that's changing manufacturers and what they're making and what's available. I'm hearing some rumblings of change of material requirements for bus bar and electrical equipment. It's going to impact us as well. It's not just the issues coming out of COVID. It's the availability of resources and materials, because the government is saying you got to use new stuff. I'm all for getting better, but maybe we should be doing a better job at selecting when we do that, and not doing it coming out of a supply chain crisis. So,
sure. Yeah. So let's jump into our next topic here, and those were fantastic insights, because I think we're all seeing that and all hearing the same things, that it's a challenge, and it's even to expand on some of the current challenges in facilities right now. And that's with a lot of the changing conditions that we're running into. And these aren't just weather related conditions. Everybody's been impacted by these in some way, depending on what part of the country. I live in Florida. We're impacted by hurricanes, tropical storms, and crazy heat all the time. But around the country, we've seen floods. Ramon mentioned floods earlier. I know the wildfires up in Canada impacted folks, but there's other things. It's the cyber attacks that have been happening. I spoke with a healthcare org the other day that was just telling me they got hit with a ransomware. And another one is really, and this is especially in healthcare, it's the workplace violence are happening, incidents are happening more frequently. So with all of these things that are happening around the country, how are your teams working to better prepare and react, not just react, but be proactive when these types of things happen at your facilities? So let's jump in here with Jonathan. Let's get started with you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done, this helps us address, we use the word resilience to natural factors and unnatural factors, unnatural being, human element, so to speak, more so than weather. So we've created standards in the way we design and build our facilities. We've created standards around the MEP design and the building envelope performance. We spread out geographically pretty broadly, so we have to take into account multiple ASHRAE zones and the climate zones and the things that come with those climate zones. We're in South Carolina. We're also up along Lake Erie, so weather is vastly different in those two scenarios, right?
Sure.
We also address workplace violence within some of those designs, especially as it relates to security and how we do access control. Where do we do access control? How do we do cameras, things like that? We also actually addressed it within our building envelope standards as well, because of, in certain areas, what type of windows should we be using? Should we be using impact resistant windows, things like that, especially in our main entrances and our lobbies, and how should we secure a main entrance? Should we have bollards, and where do those bollards go? Things like that. So we're addressing a lot of it as far as anything new that we do in that manner. I would say in the operating our existing, we were impacted specifically by the wildfires in Canada because we have a lot of hospitals and a lot, like I said, along Lake Erie. And while we didn't quite see the Armageddon doomsday that many people probably saw pictures of New York City when that all happened, and then the bright orange glow, it still was extremely smoggy, extremely hazy. And we had to put some measures in place with filter changes. We were having some conversations with some colleagues in California that deal with this on an annual basis. Like, hey, what do you guys do? Just give us some insight, give some tips on how you address this. And so some good friends over there were able to help us out. So I think it's really just looking at your processes and procedures on the upside of how do when these types of seasons occur, like you said, David, you have hurricanes. So we obviously design our buildings different down there. We have hurricane resistant windows. A lot of this is dictated by code too. Quite honestly, code tells you have to do these things when you're building. If you're in a coastal area, we have some coastal hospitals. We take a look at, what equipment do I have lying in the flood zone? Should I be elevating it? Should I be moving it? We have a hospital on the peninsula of Charleston, South Carolina. A few years ago, they got a FEMA grant to relocate their generator up to the third floor roof because it was sitting in the floodplain, and wow. that area was flooded every time they had king tide. So, it's doing those risk assessments, doing a risk assessment of your facility, understanding what those risks are. We have these just in the Midwest, we have, they used to call it 100-year rains. Well, those 100-year rains are occurring 2 or 3 times a year now. So it's really not a 100-year rain anymore because of that. So you're even that, like looking at that and how that impacts your building and how it functions. Again, I go back to risk assessments.
Yeah.
Do a risk assessment, understand what your risks are, so that you can then come up with a mitigation plan.
No, I like that. And I appreciate you sharing that insight. And Shalita, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So a lot of what Jonathan said as well, the built environment, right, is supposed to be viable for our customers, whatever industry that is. And in order to create that environment, just like Jonathan said, deferred maintenance is a calculation of risk. Well, I would say, all maintenance, once the building and facility is set, all maintenance in general is a calculation of risk. Our work is centered around risk management. Some things are inevitable. We are in Houston, as you're in Florida, there will be hurricanes. But there are other things that maybe we haven't historically planned for, like severe drought. And we experienced that this summer, right? And so we have to focus on planning. And again, as Jonathan said, risk assessment for all aspects of our facilities and potential future state. So what are our planned response efforts, and how can we reduce our response times and the negative impacts? So that goes back to the policies that Jonathan was saying. And to do that effectively, where we are, we're constantly collaborating with IT and our environmental health and safety folks to ensure that not just what we're doing internally and facilities management is known, but that our alert and notification systems are effective and reach all parties without delay or error. That allows us the space to do our job, right, when this happens. And then y'all are probably going to be sick of hearing me say this, but investing in technology, right? Whether that looks like creating multiple redundant power sources through microgrids or redundant storage of as-built that list critical equipment and their access points, or using systems that help us to quickly detect and diagnose any issues in our control systems to ensure that but when, right, an event happens, we're in the most resilient position possible.
I love that. I keep hearing the planning for the risk, understanding what those risk factors are and being prepared. And of course you can't prepare for everything, and Shalita, you forgot the one incident that happened in Texas, and that was that freeze a few years ago. I mean, I was my phone was ringing off the hook from folks that were impacted by so many different extremes that you have there in Texas. And it's crazy to see what everybody faces, and everybody in their different regions faces different things, like we said, but my goodness, it's preparing and being ready as you can. But one of the things that you also brought up, Shalita, was that collaboration with those other departments. That's key. Everybody's on the same page. And I can appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk about that technology shift that we've all seen. And, things are changing, with AI, machine learning, and all the different things, technology, the newer technologies that are available to facilities. And that's newer equipment that includes additional technologies. But we're also seeing improvements in that data collection, that processing. How are we managing our work orders in the field? How are we reducing that reliance on those rolls of drawings that you see all over the place? And also, what is that artificial intelligence and machine learning factor that comes in? And for our panelists, let's talk about that. Let's really lean into that. What do you say to organizations looking for different technologies, or looking at newer, even mechanical devices that involve technologies or require new technologies? And let's start with Chance on this one.
Yeah, I mean, right now out there's 1,000,001 technologies that are being introduced. I mean, you're hearing everything about IoT, the fault detection and diagnostic software. You get the full spectrum. I mean, everyone's trying to use their BAS systems to its best capability, and just the communication factor. But ultimately, what I like to do is go back to an organization's business drivers, right? It's organizational values, what you're trying to get. Increase your communication. So the thing I like to lean into here is enterprise asset management systems, or ERPs. Some sort of place where your organization can operate out of one hub with multiple departments. When you have one centered location for a bunch of data, it makes each decision that much better. And when you're not siloing out the business, but when it's operating on that platform, regardless of what platform you pick one that's going to do the best for your organization. So I think there's a lot there, because you got the CMMS part of it. Like for us, for instance, we just bought a new enterprise asset management system. It's got the CMMS, it's got the space planning, it's got a real estate program, all that built in. Well, all of us have operated in completely siloed areas for forever. That's just been the case. So what we're trying to do is knock down those walls to increase that communication, to make those better decisions. And ultimately, we can see that it's definitely going to drive that forward. So that's where I'm at with it.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. And Shalita, I'm gonna ask you to lean into this even more. You know, you brought up technology multiple times, and how are some ways that you're leveraging that moving forward, and what's kind of your forward thinking process?
Yeah, the question, what would I say to organizations looking at the future of facilities management and technologies, is to capitalize on every opportunity you can to advocate for, plan for, and budget for predictive maintenance technology, and like Chan said, fault detection diagnostics. And if you haven't heard about that, high level, right, it looks like using sensors, monitoring systems, and diagnostic algorithms to continuously monitor the performance of all of your systems to detect any abnormal patterns, right? And so why is that important? Because now in this labor shortage world, we're allowing other algorithms to do the heavy lifting of diagnosing a problem. So you don't have to send Jim, Sally, and Bob out there to sit around and think and brainstorm. Something's already done that for you in a fraction of the time. And with the data that they've collected, able to provide recommendations on how to address it, right? So now you don't need 3 people to figure out the problem and 6 people to fix it. You have the problem mapped out for you, and you can send the one person that knows how to address it. So you're already keeping up with the health of your equipment and potentially helping to fill any gaps in labor shortage, right? Now, if you pair that system with something else that also analyzes and repair effectiveness and repair effort times, then you can determine knowledge gaps in your staff. And then this informs maybe some training opportunities or hiring opportunities or outsourcing opportunities and needs. So it can help you budget and plan better for your facilities and address those limited labor hours that you may have. And so again, I know it's a lot. You will have to do some ROI in order to convince those stakeholders. And again, like folks said before, that healthy fear around the risk of not implementing this technology that gets you to a predictive state that keeps your facilities viable for what you need to generate revenue.
Oh, I love that. And I think both of you, from that predictive and being able to diagnose something in advance of somebody going out there to take a look at that is a big win for the organization. I think I've heard from several companies too that have implemented some different technologies through sensors and things like that, that they even catch their team still going out there and doing some of the things that they did before they implemented these systems, and they basically just come back to their team and say, stop it. Rely on the technologies. The technology does work. And then once they recognize that, then it's a better understanding that this isn't to replace somebody. This is to help them and help them be able to diagnose and respond faster. And I think that's key too. And Jonathan, share some of your insights on this.
Yeah. So one of our biggest challenges is the building automation system being ready to handle a lot of what Shalita and Chance are talking about. In many cases, I've been working on a long-term project for our health system on, what does that migration look like for us? What are we going to, and how long is it going to take us to get there? Well, I would say 70% of our 35 hospitals still have half of their controls run through pneumatics, right? So you can't do a lot of what we're talking about here with these newer technologies when your building automation system is pneumatically controlled, because you just can't, like that's a manual function. So one of the things we're working on is getting our facilities upgraded to a fully automated system. And then when we're doing that, looking at opportunities to turn the BAS system, which has traditionally been an HVAC control system, to a full building management system, where we're looking for opportunities to tie in electrical gear monitoring, lighting controls, fire alarm, getting to a point where the software itself looks at how everything in the building interacts with one another and creates a control for that, because it's not just our staff that is being asked to do more with less. Our FTEs are being cut, but it's also our customers. So in my case, it's the clinical staff. And so what can I do to automate for them? Well, I could automate functions within the patient room, right? I could automate functions of getting to a place where we are tied into Epic, electronic health record, for those who aren't familiar with Epic. And what we would do there is have setbacks in a patient room and then ramp back up time before the patient arrives, so that the room is ready and comfortable and has been cleaned from an air standpoint. Lighting controls for that. It's all of the different technologies in what is termed a smart hospital. The tie-ins to the television set and how they're doing telehealth, where a lot of places you're seeing now, and we've already started this as well. Our physicians aren't physically rounding the floor; they're doing it through telehealth. Well, in order to do that, we have to set up the TV so that they can telehealth in, and that's a technology that's we're being asked to implement as well. So you're already seeing a lot of that. You're going to see more of it. It's only going to continue to grow. I think it's also going to be one of those pieces that maybe helps us with the first challenge we were talking about with shortages with labor. It's going to be a way to overcome that. It's also going to change our strategy on the labor that we recruit.
No, I agree. I think as the technologies evolve, it's going to help us all in our different verticals that you've all shared your best practices and methods here. And I cannot thank the panelists enough for joining us today and sharing your key knowledge and your insights on these topics. So why don't we jump into some questions here?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, so much for this informative and comprehensive discussion that we had today. I'm excited to get into some Q&A. To our audience, if anybody is still, please continue to submit questions. The Q&A is just at the bottom on our dashboard here. So we have one question from Douglas. How do you determine the level of granularity when looking to have an equipment inventory or a condition assessment?
Why don't we field that one over to Jonathan to start?
Okay. So what I would say is kind of two rules of thumb, right? One being, do you maintain it? Do you have a regular routine maintenance that's involved in that piece of equipment? If so, then yes, it needs to be on your inventory list. The example I would use is a pump. There's some sort of routine maintenance on a pump. So you probably need to know about it. The other one is, and the one that I use more from a capital standpoint, is there a capital investment on it? So is it a piece of equipment that you would plan a replacement towards? So like a chiller or a boiler or an air handler. Then yes, we're obviously going to include it on an inventory list. You can get in trouble by getting too granular by putting, say, exhaust fans on there or VAV boxes or a fan coil unit. You're not going to do regular maintenance on those. There's just not really, unless the fan has belts, there's nothing else to go back to that fan and do, especially with modern fan technology and the direct drive. There's no maintenance there to that. It just runs. You might have some maintenance or a VFD that operates it, but not the fan itself. The VAV boxes, you're not going back to VAV boxes unless there's an issue with a specific box. You're not going any kind of routine maintenance on it. You're also not going to plan any kind of replacement for them. It is a run to failure concept. So we look at it and go, okay, if it's a run to failure idea, then I'm not going to carry it on an inventory list. We'll run it to fail and then we'll replace it when it does.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. So another question here we have is from Denise. We recently lost a couple of key people to a local HVAC company. I'm looking for ways to keep people when we're on a tight budget. Do you guys have any suggestions?
Yeah, why don't we field that one over to maybe Chance?
Sure. Yeah, so pretty much everything that we talked about today trying to entice them to stay, right? That whole retention factor and making sure that people aren't jumping ship. If people are happy, I'm not going to say regardless of pay, because pay is always going to be a factor, but if you're really doing everything and going above and beyond for your folks, making sure that you're upskilling, making sure you're doing those little things, knowing that you're here and when the times are getting hard, being flexible around their family matters, being whatever it may be, touching on not only their work life, but their personal life and making it so that you have a great balance. That's ultimately what's going to keep that retention, people from jumping ship. I get it though, when there's a demand out there and sometimes people just see that dollar value, with the limited resources, everyone is inflating the costs and the salary. So it's really hard to retain people. So doing every single little thing, developing that communication, ensuring your employees' happiness, that's really all I can say for making that happen.
Well, to add what you just said too, I mean, it's culture. I think people stay they like to stay in a culture where they're nurtured or there's a career path for them too. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, Chance.
Yeah, thank you both. Another question we have here is from George. I just had an FCA done a few months ago, and we are finding a ton of missing pieces. Are there any standard specs you can share, or is there a checklist available for what should be included?
Yeah, who would like to take that one?
I don't know that there's a standard. There might be. I don't know that Ashley has anything, do they, David? It's like a standard.
I don't know. I can say this.
Maybe IFMA has something out
Yeah,
there.
they might have something. We can look into that. I think one of the challenges that folks run into is it depends on if you're doing an internal FCA or potentially doing an internal, or you're hiring a third party to do it. I think part of the challenges are what someone said earlier is, kind of garbage in, garbage out. I've heard that many organizations that do FCAs, they see I think it was Chance brought up that they looked at the return data that they got for that FCA, and it was missing 80%, I think was the number you threw out there of the critical information you wanted. And maybe I misquoted, Chance, but please jump in.
Yeah, so it was really going back to how did they get the numbers they had? So when you're seeing that inflated number at the end, okay, this is great. You're looking at it. How did you get here? What did you use? What data? So, all right, if you're pulling out asset data or system data, or are you just looking at the as-built? Are you looking at the age of the equipment? What were you looking at specifically to develop that whole comprehensive plan that you put together? Because as David just said, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to be able to provide everything they need. And as Jonathan said, I don't know if there's a standard. I mean, there should be if there's not, but I think it really comes down to the scope of work. If it's a third party, how you develop that scope, what you put out there. If it's internal, I mean, might as well set a standard. So that's what you should do going forward.
I jump in.
Yeah, I think
please, Ramon. I'm sorry. Please,
if I could jump in on it, guys. I think that the issue. This is a really simple thing. You have to understand the tool. FCA is just a tool. Your master facilities plan is just a tool, and your risk assessment is just a tool. So I think that the better question is what exactly were you trying? What was the mission? What were you trying to accomplish when we got the FCAs? Because you probably, if you have that situation, you probably got the wrong assessment, because you have risk assessments, masters, and you have your FCAs. So it just depends on what that mission was, and possibly just saying that, okay, and having a keener understanding of exactly what tools I need to accomplish what. So if that didn't hit it, maybe you look at risk assessment or master facilities plan, or even going back to that organization and saying, hey, we feel you guys missed this. Is there a way that we can add it to the report? So guys, one thing you have to be mindful of is that you have to understand your tools before you just jump out there and use them.
Yeah. Well, I think I heard Jonathan jump in too.
Well, I think I was going to say pretty much what he just said. Yeah. Do you know what you're actually after? Do you know what information you're after? And then are you, if you're hiring a third party, are you setting that expectation correctly with them? Right. Are you communicating that effectively with them? That's really on you. And every assessment, doesn't matter if it's a facility assessment, risk assessment, whatever, you need to define what your scope is at the beginning so that you can get everything that you possibly needed out of that.
Well, and
Right.
I'll
And one other
go ahead.
thing, just to the person that asked the question, it's not over. Just take that part that you're missing. If you can't go back to that company, call you an independent contractor, whether if you feel the issue was HVAC, plumbing, or electrical, call you an independent contractor and have them come in and fill in that gap for you. It's not the end of the world. You can. There are other resources out there that you could possibly get free to get those questions answered for you.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
and I cannot stress this enough. Read the scope, like you guys both brought up. Read the scope, because I was sitting with a client that was actually having an FCA done, and I was listening in on the conversation, and we were reading through his contract, and at the bottom of the FCA, it says they don't climb ladders. Well, how are you going to get the roof equipment? There's not all roofs have a walkout. Or more importantly, all the fan coil units or anything above ceiling. That means all of that stuff is not captured. Or are you relying on the drawings? Well, if you're relying on the mechanical drawings, do you have the most recent? So again, read the fine print, read what's included, but like you said, define that scope yourself, because you're only going to get what you ask for.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for addressing those questions. It looks like we are out of time. If we were unable to answer your question today, we will share it with the ARC facilities team and we'll address it at a later time. But thank you to our panelists. David, thank you for hosting this discussion today. And special thank you to ARC facilities for sponsoring this webinar. A recording from today's session will be made available on our website, facilityexecutive.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.